Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. You emailed about something.
Don't
Oh,
worry about it. It's taken care of.
okay.
I called Dr. Kitchen today, and she was just behind on emails, and yeah.
It was something that you getting dealt with it, right?
Mm. It's good. Don't worry about it.
Good. Okay. I'm sorry. Things have been
Oh, yeah.
insane the past couple weeks, so we're getting there, but apologies for not getting back. Hi, Heather.
Hi, I am totally not in my car.
That's okay. That's the beauty of this thing, right?
Mhm.
We can do that.
I'm a little late getting out of work, so
That's all right. I understand, and I appreciate y'all's patience with me on the link today because I was also driving back, so I was a little late to get that out. But glad to have you. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and jump right in. I'm sure a couple others might join us. I know Blanca wanted to. All right, I'm just going to send her the link real quick. Okay. All right. So this week we're talking, well, first of all, I wanted to just kind of ask, because this is our last class before you turn in papers. Is everyone doing okay on their papers or have any questions about that?
if I do, it's too late. I've already turned it in, so
Okay. And Carlos, I know you and I chatted, but are you good?
I mean, I think so. I think you helped me kind of get so I've kind of been looking at several sources also. I have a model that I found in content, and then I have Aka and Aska's ethical standards also. But I was going to ask you about more of like a formatting issue, more of in talking about the scenario.
Okay.
In outlining the scenario, technically on the document, can like if this like if my if hands represent like the end of the document, am I allowed to put the scenario more narrower for a bit since it's a scenario and then get back to my discussion on it? Or
Yeah, that's fine.
okay, I didn't know. That's like a technical question. So.
Yeah, I'm not stressed about it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Is that all? Was that your only question, Carlos, or?
So far, yes. I mean, I don't. It's nothing more complicated than that.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and jump in. I have a little PowerPoint for you today. I'll share my screen. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about group work, some ethical issues in group work. So we're going to talk about, some knowledge competencies, skill competencies, and training for various types of groups, like task and work groups. Have y'all taken group yet?
no.
Okay. So you're going to learn in like major depth once you take the group class about these issues. We kind of just skim them because there are ethical issues that come up in group. But you will definitely learn more when you take the group class. But so there are various types of groups that you might run, like task groups or work groups, psychoeducational groups, group counseling, and group psychotherapy. And they're all a little bit different. So, task and work groups could be anything related to work or just getting something done, and not necessarily related to clients. It could be just in your workplace. And then psychoeducational groups are less therapy based, but you're still teaching like psychotherapeutic skills. So they're a little more teacher focused. And then group counseling, obviously, and psychotherapy are more of processing, serious some issues. And sometimes you can switch back and forth, like maybe half the group is psychoeducational, the other half is group. It's like a psychotherapy process group. So some of the training recommendations include, for personal psychotherapy, self-exploration and experiential groups, and participation in a training and supervisory group. So you might be a part of a personal psychotherapy group or an exploration group or participation in a training and supervisory group. So once you get out there for your LPC training, some supervisors will do supervision groups, but you will also participate in a supervision group, groups here in practicum and internship as well. So we want to make sure that as ethical group counselors, that we are culturally competent when working with diverse groups. So we emphasize appreciation, respect, and acceptance, and cultural and racial identity for all cultures. And we want to, encourage that in our groups. And we strive to increase our group members' awareness of their own multicultural identity. So, not only are we competent, but we also point out strength or help our clients explore their own cultural diversity. And we, obviously strive for that tolerance and acceptance in our groups as well. We consider the impact of adverse social, environmental, and political factors in assessing problems and designing interventions. So we have to have an awareness of the groups with which we're working, obviously, so that we can be competent, just like we would in individual counseling. And so if we do have an area that we don't really, or a population that we don't know much about, we need to educate ourselves on that population before we jump in and work in a group setting. Because sometimes, if we come from let's say, a more privileged background than maybe some of our clients, which is very possible in a variety of settings. It could be possible in a school setting. It could be possible in, let's say, like a prison setting. That would be one where maybe a lot of your clients would have less privilege than you. But we want to make sure that we have an understanding of where, our clients are coming from. And we may be in a situation where we're working with a privileged group of individuals who might be more privileged than us. So, as culturally competent counselors, we look at our own privilege, we look at the privilege of our client, and we look at our own oppression and the oppression of the clients, just to have an understanding of what kinds of cultural diversity issues might be coming into the room with us. And we acquire the knowledge and skills necessary for working with those diverse members. We seek consultation, supervision, and further education to fill any gaps. And our group counselors are aware of problems involved in stereotyping and avoid making the erroneous assumption that there are no differences between group members from the same ethnic, racial, or other group. And we want to, make sure that we're moderating our group well, so that if others in the group have stereotypical positions or engage in racial slurs, that we can manage that. We respect the roles of family and community hierarchies within a client's culture, and we assist members in determining those instances when their difficulties stem from others' racism or bias, so they don't inappropriately personalize problems. So we're really looking from a relational cultural perspective here. And the relational cultural perspective acknowledges that there are environmental factors that impact the well-being of our clients. So even if we're operating from a different theory that relies on personal independence and making positive changes and taking responsibility for those personal changes, we still want to recognize how the environment might impact the issues of our clients. We inform members about basic values that are implicit in the group process. This is a big part of group. So at the beginning of group, we talk about things like self-disclosure, confidentiality, what's safe to talk about in group and what's not safe to talk about in group. So, because even if it's a psychotherapeutic group, we want our members to share, and we want to talk about confidentiality so that the group members don't break that confidentiality when they leave the room, but we also can't guarantee it. So they're not signing a contract and held to the same standard that we are as clinicians. So as clinicians, we can obviously be sued or lose our license if we break confidentiality inappropriately. But obviously a group member is not going to have that same type of responsibility. So we want to be, careful that while we stress confidentiality and open sharing in the group, that we are not leading our members on to think that their information couldn't get out there, and this can be particularly important in certain populations like schools, because, kids will share, maybe they share something. Carlos, you're shaking your head.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was rolling my eyes because the kids can't keep anything to themselves.
Exactly. So, what we try to do is just set up a safe environment. Like, if someone starts sharing something that's super personal, you might say, just thank you so much for sharing. I just want you to be, just remember that this isn't a completely confidential space, but we can also, use your judgment on that. But we just want to make sure that the kids know that while we expect that, it's not guaranteed. And that, Carlos, I'm sure, with social media issues you see at school, that comes up as well, right? All the time. Yeah. So that's an ethical issue that we make sure that we bring that up at the beginning, but that we stress it throughout, that the importance of keeping those things confidential. And we want to increase our awareness on how myths, stereotypes, and assumptions they learn by living in society influence their work in facilitating groups. So, okay, so this is for us, sorry. So we need to understand our own personal biases, understand stereotypes in society, and assumptions that we've learned, and know how those can facilitate our work. Group counselors are committed to expanding their services to create new ways of developing groups and identifying members to promote equity, access, harmony, and participation. And group counselors promote egalitarianism by educating group members about their rights. So this is that advocacy piece, making sure that someone has the information they need or they know where to go to get services, or, maybe advocate for them in society. We establish norms that accept, value, and respect cultural differences. So I know I mentioned before that we talk about group norms. We talk about norms related to confidentiality, maybe some basic rules to respect each other in the group, how we would like our group to run, maybe how, norms in terms of like who speaks first, or who, maybe there's a talking stick or something. And that can be created as a group, but then we also want to point out that we're going to respect cultural differences in the group, respect each other. And, group counselors model relationship skills that are basic to establishing and maintaining connections between cultural members. And we want to, have a social justice orientation. We have to be aware that individual change occurs through social change, and advocate, and that we advocate with clients and on behalf of clients. That same thing we kind of mentioned before, that we want to inform people about some ways they can advocate for themselves or help advocate for them. So, ethical issues in co-leadership. Co-leaders who complement and balance each other can provide useful modeling for members. They can share responsibilities and provide mutual support. So co-leaders with a positive relationship can really model for the group what healthy communication in a group looks like. The drawbacks to the co-leadership model includes ineffective communication, competition between leaders, and overdependence on the co-leader. Just 1 second, because sorry. Sorry, I just know, oop, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. Sorry. I was just emailing Blanca because I know she'd emailed me. So I didn't want her to miss out if she is able to make it. Okay. Yeah, so some of the drawbacks include ineffective communication, competition between leaders, and overdependence on the co-leader. So yeah, maybe an overdependence on the co-leader, particularly if like maybe the counselor's a newer counselor, or they're new to the organization. And, you know, obviously if there's not a good, so we talked about how there's a benefit in modeling appropriate communication, having an extra support, and sharing responsibilities. But if the, you know, obviously if the co-leaders are in competition with one another, it's not a very healthy thing for the group. It can actually be super harmful. Unresolved conflicts between the leaders can result in splitting with the group, and co-leaders need to be committed to identify and resolve issues that interfere with them working effectively in the group. So supervision could include opportunities for co-leaders to explore personal beliefs and perspectives about co-facilitation so they could help each other grow, which is positive. And some of the ethical issues we need to consider in group membership is informed consent. So we want to make sure, like just what we talked about at the norms at the beginning, you want to make sure that informed consent is given at the beginning of the group, and that all members have an understanding of what they're going into, and that they have a choice in whether or not they are, you know, going to be in the group. Screening and selection. So screening and selection is really important in groups because I'm sure you can imagine in the settings in which you currently work, that not all participants are going to, not everyone who maybe needs counseling would be great in a group together, right? Even if they have the same issues. So for instance, let's say a friendship group, put 6 antisocial people in a group together because that's just a recipe for failure. You want to make sure that you are maybe picking one person who, let's say friendship group, one person who in a school, one person who's shy, one person who's outgoing, one person who might be a little disruptive, so that you kind of have a balance of participants that can really help support each other with their if you have 5 shy participants in a group, no one will talk. If you have all disruptive students in a group, then it's going to be too much to handle, right? So you just try to find that balance. You can always run up groups at different times, but you want to make sure you're screening intentionally. And of course, informed consent with children is going to be a little different than informed consent with adults. And permission to be in that group is going to have to be given by the parents, of course. With involuntary participation are obviously going to be a little different. They might be mandated, like through the court system, or maybe for like domestic violence or anger or something like that. So, informed consent is going to be extra important in involuntary participation groups, and you're obviously going to be managing those in a different way. Group members have the freedom to leave the group unless it's one of those involuntary participation groups, but even then, they always have a choice, right? You can choose to uphold the requirements of your probation, or you can choose to not do that and experience the consequences, but it's always a choice. You do want to stress that consistency in the group is very important. So, you're always free to leave the group, but you need to do so in an appropriate way. For instance, if someone has to quit the group early, maybe they have a chance to say goodbye. And, you want to have norms around, like, people are not just leaving the group 30 minutes early, things like that. So we want to have freedom always to leave the group, but you can do it in an appropriate way. So there also are psychological risks to being in a group, in a psychological group. There are, confidentiality, as we mentioned, can be a major issue, and one that we want to just inform our clients about very explicitly. Confidentiality with minors, obviously, you're going to go over informed consent, which includes the limitation to confidentiality for minors, so that if someone shares something in the group that needs to be told to a parent or an adult, they know before they share it. And then confidentiality with online groups. So let's say you're running an online group, you would definitely want to talk explicitly about how to protect confidentiality and the limits to the protection of confidentiality. I imagine that would be a little more challenging to run an online group, right? I don't know that I would want to take that on. It can be done. It definitely can be done. There are online platforms that are HIPAA compliant and secure, but you would just want to take a lot of precautions with that. What do you guys think about that before I move on, about online groups?
I don't guess I'm very trusting. We don't always know that that's who's really there.
True. So if you were in a chat room, that could be an issue. Like, if someone uses an avatar instead of their face or something like that, they could be deceitful. They could use the information negatively. That could be a real problem. It could also be a huge problem in a crisis situation. What if that person wasn't who they said they were or where they said they were, and then they say they are going to do something to hurt themselves or someone else? So that's a big one, right? Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts about that?
I would just agree and just say that, and then also maintaining a sense of confidentiality, it's really hard to do on an online group. In one window, and then another window could be something being recorded of this.
Absolutely.
Or typing on social media or something.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, what if they're in a chat room and they're copying and pasting? I mean, of course, someone could still do the same thing and run off and write online something that was said in a group earlier, but it just seems so easy if you're already online. Mm-hmm. So that's a good point. Okay, so unethical use of group techniques. So it's unethical for group leaders to use techniques that are unfamiliar to serve it. So that just means not evidence-based. To serve a hidden agenda or enhance power. So that would be like, if they're running a political campaign and they're going to have a support group about something. If you have ulterior motives for your group. Solely create an intense atmosphere. So you have to be really careful with the group dynamics and use the influence that you have in an ethical way. And it's also unethical to pressure members or deprive them of their dignity. So group can be really useful because let's say you're in a substance abuse group and someone's in denial. Well, if there are 8 other people in that group, they might say, oh, that really sounds like what I went through before I could accept. Or I remember telling myself that. And it's used to help that client, right? But you might get people in your group that are in a lot of pain that want to hurt other people. And so as the group leader, you have to really protect all the members of the group. You have to manage the group in a way that's going to be helpful to the members of the group and not harmful. So if someone's attacking, or if someone's getting ganged up on, or if someone's dominating the entire group and not letting anyone else talk, that can be a problem as well. So you have to be aware of the group dynamics and understand the ethical implications of not intervening, you know, in a situation that could be harmful to a client. So recommendations in using group techniques. So techniques should have a therapeutic purpose, and they should be grounded in a theoretical framework, and client self-exploration should be fostered. So we're not just going to do something random just because we think it might be fun, or that's something we want to do in the group that's not evidence-based or grounded in a theory or helpful to group members. Pretty straightforward there. Leaders should modify techniques for culturally diverse clients. They shouldn't be used haphazardly, and they should be introduced in a timely and sensitive manner, and group members should be given freedom to participate or pass on experiments. Group leaders should use techniques with which they are familiar, and they should be aware of potential impact of techniques. Confidentiality and issues of privacy take on added dimensions when group members and leaders communicate via the internet. Research focused on the intersection of digital technology and therapy is in its infancy. So yeah, we have to be extra careful if we're doing an online group to make sure that the approaches we're using are evidence-based. It's happening a lot more now. It's just group workers need to prepare themselves to receive a friend request from either a current or former members of the groups they lead. This seemingly straightforward request is complex and requires reflection. So what do you guys think about this one?
I know I have a real good friend that is a counselor here in town.
Mm-hmm.
And for a little bit of time, she saw my daughter.
Okay.
And while she saw my daughter, we had to remove each other from our friends list on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And she was real big about that.
Yeah, because that could really influence her work with your child if she was seeing stuff, because it would be less objective, right?
Right.
And also if your daughter got on your page, you know, and saw things, it might just be, it's just a boundary issue. So thank you for sharing that. And in a group situation, you could see how that could be even more friendly and feel more friendly for the clients in the group to maybe want to friend each other. They might friend each other, and that's really their choice. You know, they might actually develop a strong support with someone in the group or a friendship. But then, of course, naturally, they're going to want to friend you, right?
Right.
And probably 9 times out of 10 a bad idea, I would say. So.
To add on to that, I was going to mention that also you want to not do that or not accept a request because you want to ultimately protect their confidentiality in their working relationship with you.
That's right, because if someone asks them, well, who's your friend? Or if someone asks you, who's your friend? What are you going to say? So that's a really great point, Carlos, that it's one I hadn't really thought of because, you know, some people have like 1,200 friends or whatever, but at the same time, you know, you are protecting their confidentiality by not friending them because other people can see your friends. So good point. Any other thoughts on that one?
You may also not want them having access to your personal stuff away from that situation.
Yeah. Because you want to keep those boundaries clear, and they might feel more friendly toward you, which could change the relationship and blur the boundaries. And also, you know, it is a professional relationship. So, you know, in all counseling relationships, we let our clients know that we're not going to be spending time with them in public as, you know, friends or going to their birthday parties or anything. I mean, unless there's a really good reason to. For instance, like, so that's the thing I love about ethics. There's always an exception to the rule, you know? For instance, like you said, being in a smaller town and the indirect relationship you had with that counselor is a little more complicated, but you put some things in place to protect that relationship. Also, let's say you were working with a client for a long time and they wanted you to attend a funeral. That would be very therapeutic for them. There's a way you could do that and still protect their confidentiality by sitting in the back, talking about what you might say if someone asks how you know them in advance. You could come up with something, and then leaving immediately after, something like that. Sometimes there are exceptions that would be therapeutic and maybe more harmful for you not to go. But most of the time, we're not going to socialize with our clients, and we make that clear. So that's something you can just even add into the informed consent. And also, I will not friend you. Please don't take that as an offense. We just want to protect your confidentiality, and we want to make sure that, the boundaries are clear in our roles. So, great, y'all. Thanks. And then termination in closed groups. So, in a closed group, the task of leaders is to help. So there are open groups and there are closed groups. And open groups are like a standing support group for whatever population every Wednesday at this time. And people can come and go and leave the group or stay with the group for as long as they need to. And there's kind of no questions asked. But sometimes, a lot of the time we'll have groups that are like an 8-week session on grief or an 8-week session on, I don't know, health, wellness, meditation, whatever it might be. And stick with that same group. And that's where you get a little more strict about the rules in terms of like showing up, when you're leaving, if someone has to leave the group early, having some closure on that, because people share really intimate things and you want to make sure that people aren't just coming in and out of the group if it's a closed group, because there's a lot of trust issues involved in that. And so when we're terminating those groups, we want the leaders, help members review their work and their patterns from the first to final session. So, you want to review everything that they've done well and the growth that they've achieved. And, you're going to talk with group members from the beginning of the group experience about the ending and how to terminate productively. So you would let them know, this is an eight group, 8-session closed group. So at the end of the group, we'll be done. So you start with that at the beginning so that they have expectations set up and they don't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have support anymore. What am I going to do? You would also start that termination process about 3 sessions before the last ones to kind of prepare them. And termination in open groups. So you would teach members to give adequate notice when they decide it's time to terminate. And if the member's intention is to leave is not adequately discussed in the group, this can undermine potential valuable group experiences. So again, we're really intentional about when people come and go, because it provides closure for people. It helps them say goodbye. A lot of people are really bad at saying goodbye because it's painful, so they avoid it. And some people can't say goodbye when they're the one leaving because it's too painful. But it can be really good for them to do that for those that really need that closure, but then also for themselves to get that validation from the group members that they were valuable, that they were cared for, that, that they wish them well. Right. So, in an open group, an ideal termination is one that's been mutually agreed upon by the member and the leader, and for which there's sufficient time to work through the process of loss and separation. Obviously, it's not a perfect world, and sometimes things come up and people may leave the group and you can't control it, but you can still process that with the group. But if you can, you want to try to give the group a little time. And then you can assist members who are leaving with reviewing what they've learned in the group and what they intend to do with that learning. And the remaining group members often have reactions about the loss of a member. And so you could give them an opportunity to express their thoughts and feelings after the person has left, but especially if it's an unexpected leaving of the group. All right, so that's all I have in terms of ethics with group, but Let's see. Does anyone have any thoughts about that or questions? No?
I had a question about, I don't know, when you're in terminating a closed group, how many sessions on average should you devote to that process of the person leaving and the experience of others who may want to, I don't know, who may have feelings about that person leaving? Is that usually something you would just reserve for that last session?
You mean if someone leaves before the end of a closed group, or at the end of the, like, when you should start termination with a closed group in general?
Yeah, so I guess, like, for example, if we did an 8-week session and the last session, I guess you have people who are leaving and everything, do you normally have to spend maybe one session processing that with the members, or should you maybe do that for the last 2 sessions on average?
I mean, I would definitely bring it up like the third session before the end. Just
Okay.
like, hey guys, this is coming up. So just in the next couple weeks, we're going to be closing things out and really looking at the progress we've made. And, just know that this is still your time. And if there are things that you want to talk about before the end, the next couple weeks is a good time to do so. And it's kind of similar with any counseling. Let's say you're terminating in an individual counseling relationship, you would want to do the same. Start termination about 3 sessions out. And then the next session you would say, because that's the third one, then the next one you have that last session next. So you would just say, hey, just a reminder, next sessions, these are our last 2 sessions. Is there anything you want to talk about now? And then the last session could even be more of a celebration, just like really focusing on the changes, the strengths, the ways that the person in the group has grown. And really like look at it more as, celebration or graduation kind of, especially with group, because there's more people. So you can kind of look at it as like a milestone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
All right, good. Any other questions or thoughts? Nope. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and leave this as a recording because I know I sent that link out late and I feel bad for those that could not make it. But I appreciate you being here. And, obviously you're welcome to use this in lieu of the assignment this week if you choose. And that's all, I have for you. And I hope you have a great week. All right. Bye.
Bye.